Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Cordamt and we are back to talk a little bit more about Pillars of Eternity. In the previous episode we finished the game, we were successful, but I wanted to share some thoughts about the game, the story, our characters, and we're gonna look into that here. Loading up the game puts me back at the start of this fight, so I'm just quickly going over it in a fast forward motion before we actually get to the discussion of the game. So bear with me. Okay, so we're about finishing up with this fight again. This one was much cleaner actually, because we killed Theos before he even jumped to any of those vessels. I'm just gonna skip over this conversation because we've seen it already in the previous episode. So I went for this. Okay, and this way we can discuss a little bit more of the game, because in the last episode I didn't have much time to do it. It would be a very long episode if I tried to do it.
Hey.
And right now this is just before the, this is after the fight with Theos, as we just saw. And just before we advance over here, where Skane talks to us and he tries to seduce us with power and tries to bring us to do the bidding of Vodica, which we did not do. We still went with Berath, and before interacting with the machine, which finishes up the game forever. So once you interact with the machine and you make your choice, the game will be over. When the game is over, if you try to load the game again, from your Triple Crown save game, which is what I just did, it will load it up right before you have the fight with Theos. That's why I had to repeat it over here. My friend Mr. Piggy is still among us, my favorite companion of all of us. And now we get to talk a little bit about the game, what we did, who we brought, the lore, the story. I'm gonna give a review of the game, my personal opinion with the game, what I think about it, all those things. And I also want to mention, and I've spoke this at the beginning, on the very first episode I mentioned this, and I've also been saying it throughout some comments that people have been asking me about. I do intend on taking this save game, or this character, my main character, the Rogue, and importing it to Pillars of Eternity 2, and begin a fresh game there with my character. I've also said before, that will be mostly a blind playthrough. I've only played the game for a little bit, like leaving the first area and traveling by boat to a city. That's pretty much all I remember. So it will be a new experience for me, and I'm very excited about it. I've even been training the initial area a little bit with, a character I just created, to see if I don't make a fool of myself on those initial areas, because they are very difficult in Path of the Damned, in my opinion. I might just be a noob. But in any case. So, let's talk a little bit about Pillars of Eternity 1. First of all, I would like to say that it is a wonderful adventure. It's a long adventure, but it's very worthwhile. In my opinion, if you've never played the game, it deserves being played. If you like CRPGs, classic role-playing games, you should give it a try. At least try it. At this point, the game has been out for a few years. You can get it for very cheap on multiple platforms. Mine is on GOG, but you also have it on Steam. I think it was even given away for free on the Epic Store at some point, maybe during a Christmas, one of those giveaways they do or something. So you can easily get this game, and it is, in my opinion, one of the best games ever made, and definitely one of the best CRPGs ever made. To me, in terms of CRPGs, I think I rank, well, naturally I'm gonna rank Baldur's Gate, 1 and 2 as the top one, and I think that in second place it's gotta be Pillars of Eternity, because I really love this game. I will also say that when I first started playing this game, I jumped what's the expression? I dove right in to the maximum difficulty, so Path of the Damned, and I got absolutely slaughtered. My only background in classic RPGs was mostly Infinity Engine games, so Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment, and those rules are very different to what's being used in this game. So I got absolutely massacred. I wasn't understanding why the game was so difficult. I couldn't see what I was doing wrong. Maybe my pride was getting in the way of it, because I got to a point where I consider that I'm fairly good at playing, for example, Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and those games. And coming here, I couldn't really believe that I was sucking so much. So I thought, okay, I don't suck, the game sucks. So I was very wrong about that. Once you learn the mechanics, once you learn how to position properly, once you learn how things work, like accuracy for spells and, you know, the defenses, what to attack, what not to attack, all those things, the game makes a lot more sense. And it went from being a frustratingly difficult game to being, oh my god, I love this game so much. Really, I love this game. It's very worthwhile playing. Like I said, it's a long journey, but it's very, very worth it. I think every single step of this game is worth it. Let me just unpause it so you can see Mr. Piggy walking around while I'm talking here.
Yes.
And I can put my characters over here, looking at you guys.
Hey.
It is very worth playing. I think every step of the way is a worthwhile experience. There are definitely some games, I'm not saying this is only for CRPGs, but just games in general, where you have like a very promising start. The start of the game is absolutely amazing. The initial area, the enemies, the skills, everything makes sense. Everything's exciting. You enjoy every single bit of it. And then when you start reaching mid-game or late game, some areas start to lose interest, or they're poorly made, or they were rushed, or they're ugly. I mean, I'm sure there's examples for a ton of games out there that do something like this. And if you've played video games before, to a certain extent, you will surely know what I'm talking about. This one, I think, really hit the spot in terms of spreading out the game, spreading out the quests, the difficulty. I think everything is really well done. I enjoy this game from the beginning when we are in Gilded Vale. I think the difficulty curve, naturally, once you get used to the mechanics, is well done. I think the way that the companions are introduced to you is good. They make sense. You can progress through the game in a way that makes sense and is always enjoyable. So Gilded Vale is fun. You reach Defiance Bay. You have a very large quest hub to explore. A lot of quests, a lot of people to meet. Really well done. You move to Twin Helms, which is even not so much the style that I usually appreciate, because I like mostly, not necessarily very urban areas, but more urban than what Twin Helms is, because Twin Helms looks like a jungle with some houses. But in any case, I like Twin Helms. I like the way they made the factions there. I like the way they made the clans and the tribes, and they all have their own personalities. The distribution between the districts, I think it's well done. I think the expansions are very, very well done. And like I said before, there are games where some areas start to lose their appeal, and there's definitely games where the expansions are absolute crap, or they just feel very distant from the main game. They don't make sense. They don't tie up together very well. I think in this game, the expansions are excellent. The whole area of White March is very well done. It's a cool area. It's a pretty area. You have a lot of content and fun content. You don't have boring, empty areas. I think the main quest for both part 1 and part 2 of the White March are very well done. I also think they tie up well with the rest of the game and even the ending slides. So just overall, a lot of fun. You even have Craghold Bluffs, which feels like something a little bit more separated from the rest of the game. It just looks like here's an area that we're gonna send you to do some quests for a challenge. But it's excellent. It's very well done. I mean, you have the Thorn Bannerman assaulting the stronghold of one of the most famous wizards in Eora, Console Hot. You get to meet and face Console Hot. I mean, it's awesome. So progression throughout the game, the areas, excellent in my opinion. As for the characters, I like all of the companions I've played with. Granted, there are some that I haven't explored very much. So, for example, this is the crew that I usually like to play with the exception of Kana. Kana was a new inclusion in my group here, but he did well, and I thought I liked his contributions for the story and the banter and all those things. I've played a little bit with Pelagina, and that's pretty much it. I tried Hiravius once, didn't really like him because I didn't understand druids at the time, and you know, I didn't explore him very much. But out of all of them that I played with, I liked them. I think their story is cool. I think their lore is well done. Their banter is awesome, especially Durance. I love Durance. There really feels like a bro. He's just always there for you. He helps you. He loves animals. He's just overall awesome. And I also think it fits his role with the tank. Aloth is cool. I like his backstory with, you know, Isilmir, his semi-awakened soul or whatever he calls it. I like that he was part of the Leaden Key. It's an interesting background. Durance, like I said, is the most interesting out of them all for me, with his devotion to Magran, and you know, then the whole story progressing with Magran, you learning about the God Hammer and Magran's interaction with Wodica and all those things. Makes for a very appealing backstory. Love him. Kana is mostly just, I think, a fun inclusion. I didn't think he was very... I didn't think his backstory had much depth, other than him being someone interested in learning new things. And just overall being fun. He's a fun inclusion. The Grieving Mother has a darker past and is overall more, you know, melancholic, but I still like her. I think it makes sense for her backstory and what she represents. And, you know, the other ones I don't want to talk too much about because I don't know them that well, but from the ones I know, in terms of companions, I think this game did a very good job. If you also choose to go with custom companions, you will also be very well served, because you have a lot of different classes in the game, you have many different ways to build characters in the game, a lot of different items that you can do, so you can always have fun. I've had playthroughs where I only used story companions, like this one, and I've had playthroughs where I had only custom companions, and I've enjoyed them both greatly. So, very well done on that. So yeah, areas are very cool, the quests are very cool, the companions are very cool. I like the classes as well, and the abilities they have available to them. I like the itemization in the game. I think it's well done. I like the way they made the enchantments, the way you can enchant them with quality. You can have lashes for secondary damage, slaying, and with the expansion you also have Durgan refined weapons and armor. I think it's really cool. I like the amount of items we have, quick items, weapon sets. This is kind of classical, right? But I do enjoy the way they did it. I like the food, although I think it's done better in Pillars of Eternity 2, which is made in a different way, because this way you kind of just fill up your inventory with a lot of items. And if you notice this playthrough, I always had my inventory full, pretty much. So this is kind of unnecessary. I think there should be a better way to handle food. Okay, so with this discussed, just to say one final time, I think that this game did a lot of things well. I think my problem with the game wasn't the game's fault. It was mostly me being so used to a specific type of CRPG and rule set, in this case Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, that when I swapped to this one I had a lot of difficulty adapting to it. But once you do, trust me, it's very rewarding, And if you saw this playthrough, it's very, very manageable, okay? So if you're just looking at this video, just looking for a review on the game, trust me, you can play on the highest difficulty and it's not that hard, okay? Once you grasp the notions and you understand the mechanics, the game is very, very playable and it makes sense, okay? That's very important. The game makes sense. There are some bugs in the game and they can be a little bit annoying. Stuff like you paralyze someone and you knock them prone and you see them running around casting spells. This obviously makes no sense. This shouldn't happen. And not only is it annoying because you are seeing animations that shouldn't exist, but it will also be detrimental to your own strategy and gameplay. Because, for example, if you are trying to petrify or paralyze a bunch of enemies in this region, and your plan is to concentrate them over here and then just nuke them all in AoE, if you see one guy who's petrified, paralyzed, stunned, knocked prone, and confused running all the way over there, then it ruined your strategy, and it shouldn't. Or if he just gets up and shoots a spell at one of your characters and kills them. I mean, it can be very annoying and frustrating, especially if you're playing in Iron Man. Losing a run to something like that, I would be upset, personally. With that said, I think that for the most part, I can live with that very well. It doesn't bother me that much. I just wish it got fixed. I don't believe it's gonna be fixed at this point. I just wish the bugs weren't there in the first place. Other things I can say. I think there are some enemy types which are definitely a lot harder than all of the rest. So, for example, at the beginning of the game, when you start facing shades, phantoms, specters and all that, they are extremely deadly, while other enemies are completely irrelevant for, well, not, I'm going to the extreme, but they are much harder than the rest. And also when you start reaching mid-game and you start facing druids, they are so much more obnoxious and difficult than any other kind of enemy type. They can wreck your party with a single spell. It's so much harder than the rest. When you go to the end game, if you start fighting monks, the Torn Bannerman, Lagufeth, they are exceedingly difficult when you are comparing them to other enemy types. I think there should have been a little bit more balance there. I'm not saying that every single enemy in a CRPG should be a boss fight. I definitely don't agree with that. I think there should be fodder type enemies like Zorips, goblins, boars, spiders, those kinds of lobby enemies that you kind of want to face them in large groups, and that's where their strength comes from. And not only do they gain strength from in numbers, but it's also very, very enjoyable for the player to see, look, there's 30 goblins or Zorips over there coming at me. I'm gonna nuke them all with a fireball, and see bits of goblins flying all over the place. It's very rewarding, it's very fun. So there is space for those kinds of enemies. But when you have enemies in a game and they are presented to you in a way that looks like they should be, on the same power level, but they are so different, I think there should be a little bit more balance. Other than that, I really enjoy the enemy fights in this game. And the last thing I have to say about that is in terms of boss fights. I do think that boss fights in this game, well, and first of all, I would classify boss fights in this game as dragons, all of them, the Kraken, and the famous wizards. So in this case, I'm talking about Consulhot and Lengrath. I think those are the only ones that you actually face that are, considered very special. I think that the dragons are properly done because you need to face them in a specific way. You need to learn how they work and defend against their attacks properly. And the way you can see that is if you see my fight against the Sky Dragon, or for example, the Adra Dragon, or the Alpine Dragon for that matter, they might all seem very easy. You might look at the fights and think, oh, this isn't anything special, the dragon just died. But that's not the case.
Burning low.
Shut up, I'm talking. There's careful positioning put into place there. There is use of summons. There's a good use of our main tanky there with a certain item, consumables. But overall, just positioning is the most important part. However, if you look at my last fight with dragons, which was in the bog, where we also faced Lengrath, the simple fact that I did not position it there properly at the start of the fight, I nearly lost my entire backline to a single ability. So they can be extremely dangerous, and that's what they should be. Okay, so I like dragons, I think they're done well. However, if we look at certain fights like, for example, Console Hot, I think Console Hot is too much of a pushover. He just runs at you, he doesn't buff properly with defensive spells, and he kills over very, very quickly. I think that fight is a little bit underwhelming in that sense. I think it should be a lot tougher. Lengrath, I don't have much of an issue with, because she's accompanied by 2 dragons, so naturally she's much more dangerous. But I also think that she should be more powerful as an independent spellcaster, okay? Instead of... At a certain point, it kind of seems like she's just another enemy mage. Although she does play a little bit better than Console Hot, for example. But, I mean, there's not many boss fights in the game anyway. This one I like. I like this fight with Theos and the 2 vessels over here. I think it's properly done. I wouldn't change anything here. And, well, maybe... Because the thing is, if we see the fight in this video, which is probably going to be sped up, I killed him before he could even send his soul into one of the vessels, because I disabled him. And on the one hand, I think it makes sense that if you can disable him, you can prevent his soul from going away. I like that. But at the same time, I kind of wish that once he got to a certain health threshold, his soul should jump out regardless of whether he is CC'd or not, just to make the fight a little bit tougher. But honestly, I think I like it like this. If you are able to debuff him and disable him on the times where he wants to send his soul away, and you can kill him during that CC, I think you did a good job, and I think it's well done. So never mind what I said, I like the way this fight is done. The Kraken, on the other hand, is a fight that I've never really understood, because when I'm going for the Kraken, I'm usually at max level, because I usually do the White March part 2, you know, closer to the end of the game. And once you reach that point, if you kill the tentacles, I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't even know what the Kraken does. I've never found out what the Kraken does, because once I kill the tentacles, I send it there in, or whatever tank I have, I start debuffing and CCing him with stuns, paralyzes, petrifications, and he just dies. I don't even know what he does, I'm gonna be completely honest. So that fight, I think, could also use a revamp and be made much tougher. Okay, so I think that's it for a lot of the things I wanted to say about the game. I also want to discuss what we did here with our party. So this is something that I had planned pretty much from the beginning of the game. I had set my mind to the way that I wanted to play with this party and the people that I wanted. So the plan was always, and again this is mostly for people who are just watching this video and not the entire playthrough, I wanted it there as my main tank, which you always was. I wanted Kana for an off tank, while also providing some support with his chants and his invocations and all that, but mostly for off tanking purposes. Aloth was gonna be my AoE damage dealer, which he was. This was my main damage in AoE. And also, you know, a useful buffer, debuffer, and, you know, disabler. Because in my opinion, the most important role for any kind of spellcaster is not to deal damage. At least not at the start of a fight. The most important role for a spellcaster, be it an arcane spellcaster or a divine spellcaster, these are terms that I usually use in Baldur's Gate, but if it's a wizard, or if it's a priest, or if it's a druid or a cipher, I think their most important roles is to disable the opposition and protect your own party. Only after that's done can and should they start dealing damage. And Aloth does a very good job with that. I think wizards are extremely powerful in this game, and Aloth did a very good job at that. He was our main disabler with a lot of paralyzations. Chill Fog was useful the entire game just by dealing damage and blinding, and even stunning with the Rod of Pale Shades, which I think is kind of broken, let's be honest. Then we got Ninagoth's Freezing Flame, which paralyzes on hit in an AoE. We had the Wall of Many Colors. He just has so much stuff available to him. Just so much. So he's an awesome disabler, he's an awesome damage dealer, and he can be, if properly buffed up with defensive properties, he can be very, very tough to kill. The Grieving Mother, she was always going to be a DPSer, but her main reasoning here is also for spellcasting. She does a lot of damage with her Blunderbuss. We used the Lead Spitter for most of the game, and then we picked up the Silver Flash in the White March Part 2. We started using this one, and we also briefly used Stormcaller because you can actually equip this with a Cipher. And she did very well, even without any kind of talent for it. So I do believe that you can properly build, you can do a build for the Grieving Mother for hunting bows, and she will be very, very successful, really. But the main appeal for me in the Grieving Mother is that she's a Cipher, and you get a lot of very, very powerful spells. So just to review them a little bit, Mind Wave, all the way from level 1, can be a very, very good spell. This is just an AoE prone, which lands a lot of the times, especially if you also buff with priest spells and accuracy buffs. This can disable a lot of people. On level 2, you have Mental Binding, which will paralyze somebody for a very long time, and it targets will, which is very, very strong as well. You have Phantom Foes that will leave everybody flanked, it's gonna help your entire party, and if you have somebody like a rogue, it's even better. On level 3, honestly, there's not much to look at here, except maybe Active Psychic Echo, which I used maybe once, which is cool. But then, when you start reaching level 4, and you get Pain Block, and you get Silent Scream, man, I used these a lot, and they were all excellent. Level 5, honestly, I didn't use any of these. I used Tactical Meld in this last fight, in the previous episode, the final episode of the playthrough, just for some extra accuracy, and that was the only time I think I used this spell. It is good, but you usually want to do something different before using this. On level 6 is where I think you unlock the most powerful spell she has, which is Amplified Wave. You just deal a bunch of crush damage to everybody around your target. It's only for foes, so your party is protected. The radius is immense, and the prone duration is insane. You can prone people for 17 seconds on a crit with this, and deal a bunch of damage in area. It's just incredible. And if you're using something like a blunderbuss or a fast weapon, you can regain the 60 focus points that this costs in a matter of seconds. So you can just keep on using Amplifying Wave, CCing everyone, doing a bunch of damage. Best spell she has, hands down. Well, in offensive terms. At level 7, I mean, Time Parasite is cool. Stasis Shell, I can imagine it being cool. I've never used it in the entire game. This one I've used sometimes, which is kind of funny. You steal attack speed, it's good. And then at level 8, you have the best spell for the Cipher. I may be calling her a Psyker because I've been playing Darktide as well, and I get confused. But Defensive Mind Web, I think, is the best spell she has. This lasts for 46 seconds. Well, naturally, she has intellect buffs, but you get the idea. The radius is 5 meters, again, with intellect buffs. But everybody in the area is gonna have the best defense of anybody in the Mind Web. This means that you can have Eder, which has incredible defenses all around. You have this guy buff up with a vigorous defense, which gives plus 20 to all defenses for 16 seconds. In a Mind Web, it means that everybody in that Mind Web is effectively a massive tank. They're pretty much unkillable at that point. If you have the Mind Web up, if you hit your party and it lasts for the duration of the fight, you're pretty much safe. I don't think anybody's gonna die. Naturally, things can still happen. You can have an enemy cast an arcane dampener on you and you lose all your buffs. There's certain things that can screw you over, but you are excellently defended. So
your thoughts must flow.
Her spells are, in my opinion, invaluable. She's very, very important, and I love having a Cipher on my group. My main character, the Rogue, I mean, I like the idea of a Rogue, especially being a tiny person with a bow, or even with weapons. Even with guns, I like the idea of it. I went for a ranged one because, again, I like bows or ranged weapons. I especially like Borasane, which can crit, which can stun on crits, which is very, very good. I would also enjoy a melee rogue, but I don't feel safe playing a melee rogue in Path of the Damned for a Triple Crown achievement, especially if I'm making a video series for the channel. I think it's much more likely for him to die. And if you see the playthrough, as we progressed, he went down a couple of times because his endurance is very low, his health is very low, his defenses are very low, so it's very likely that he's gonna go down. And having him in melee, I wouldn't feel safe. In any case, I love the role that he plays. I love that he has the high mechanics. He can take care of all the traps. He can take care of every locked door, every locked chest. It's a very useful character to have. Naturally, you can give mechanics to any other of your characters. It doesn't need to be a rogue. You could have, for example, Aloth with mechanics. That would work out perfectly. Or even the Grieving Mother. It works perfectly well on them. But I like the idea of a sneaky rogue, handling traps and sneaking about and dealing very high and very precise damage. I like that idea, and I think he performed exceedingly well. I think he did exactly what he was supposed to do, which is you start a fight, you identify the priority targets, and you take care of them. You stun them, you blind them, you outright just kill them. It's a very, very useful character to have in your party for single target damage. So very happy with the choice. And finally, we have Durance. I was gonna say that Durance is probably the most important companion that we have. It's very debatable, right? Because I think everybody plays a very important role. I don't think this party would work without Eder or Kana. I think this party would also not work as well without Aloth, or the Grieving Mother, or Durance. Everybody is important here. But I will say that priest spells, especially when you're more around the mid game and even the early game, are exceptionally important. Just the fact that you have interdiction, this is an amazing debuff throughout the entire game, and this is a per encounter use. Stuff like Armor of Faith at the start of the game, it's incredible. Blessing, useful throughout the entire game. Withdraw, same thing. There are so many awesome spells in the priest lineup of spells that I would not imagine myself playing this game without bringing in a priest. Honestly, I think it's one of the most important classes and one of the most powerful classes you can get in this game. I love this companion, I love this class. I think priests are very, very good in this game. Okay, so that's the lineup. My idea was always one main tank, one off tank, one wizard, one priest, and the other two are flex spots. I like the Cipher very much, that's why I chose the Grieving Mother. I think she's very useful. And I had a rogue here. This rogue could have been a monk, could have been a druid, could have been a barbarian. In my opinion, with this group, I would always like to have here something that's able to deal a lot of damage. And there's a lot of classes that can fill that role, a ranger for example. It could even be a fighter specialized in damage, like two-handed weapons or something of that sort. So these two are definitely the flex spots here. I think the core is the priest, wizard, tank and off tank. But I'm very happy with all of them. Okay, so I have to edit the video here because the next part I wanted to show I kind of overextended and I wasn't really liking the way it was going. So I was briefly looking at our lineup here with our two tanks in the front line and then our four-man back line. Most of the damage coming in from these three, with Durance being the most of utility in terms of buffing, and Aloth and the Grieving Mother in terms of disabling the enemies and then a lot of damage, and my rogue for priority target, single target killing. Now, I also wanted to go a little bit over how I built each of my characters, but I cannot go into too much detail, otherwise this will be like a 3-hour video and it just can't be. So, in terms of it there, we can just look over here at the items that I am using. I have the Company Captain's Cap, very useful for the immunities and the stats. They all work very well for him. The armor doesn't really matter which armor you use, as long as you have good damage resistance and, you know, a decent passive over here. I like defense against prone and push because I want them to be sturdy in the front. I don't want people to go around him and just start hammering my backline. I have deflection and defense rings on him. Boots of speed were surprisingly useful, allowing him to go from one side to the other, pick up priority targets, engage people which are running for my backline. I thought these were the best boots I could have for him. Very, very cool. The Cloak of Comfort, I don't even remember where I picked this up, but I know it was very early on in the game. And it's, I think, the best cloak you can get for it there. Because these all defenses stack with these kinds of defenses and with these kinds of defenses. Okay, so from these three items, I'm getting +9 deflection here, +9 to all other defenses here, and then on top of that, an extra 5 to all of those, +30 to max endurance, and also damage reduction. Everything that you want a tank to have. Finally, for the gloves, you can have kind of whatever. I just gave him some accuracy because there were no others that I really wanted. And I also gave him the looped rope, which gives him some more defenses against disabling effects. You could give him anything else really. You could give him a girdle of mortal protection. You could give him a belt that might, you know, give him some stat that he does not already have, like might, constitution, resolve, something like that. But it can be kind of whatever. In terms of gear, I'm using Dragon's Maw Shield mostly because it's fun. Shield Bash is cool, Taste of the Hunt is cool. The rest of these things isn't particularly interesting. The enemies engaged, you don't need it as a fighter. So I'm using it because it's a cool shield. You could use any kind of shield you wanted as long as it has high deflection. Old Garen's Wall, for example, is perfect. So that's it there. And in terms of abilities, talents and all that, what I'm gonna do, and I apologize for not going into more depth here, if you guys want any kind of further explanation, leave a comment asking something in specific and I will help you out. But if I go over these one by one, Like I said, this video will be 6 hours long. So I'm just gonna show you guys. Feel free to pause the video at any time you want to see any kind of specific skill, but you can get the idea here. And every single time that I level up, it's at the beginning of a video. So if you look at my playthrough, you're gonna see every single level up that I did. So you can find everything you want there. These are just the active effects. I'm gonna go for what matters here, which are the abilities and the talents. So these were my choices. I think they are very solid choices for a frontline tank. Very, very good. If you build your tank like this, you will be fine. Okay. Secondly, going for Kana. Kana's purpose, like I said, is to be an off tank. He's gonna be picking up people that go around there or are coming from another side. Like we saw in this fight, we had two enemies spread apart, like we had one here and one here. So there goes for one, Kana goes for the other. He can be very useful as an off tank to pick up those stragglers. He has a lot of utility with his chants, and one of the items we're using is the Voice of the Mountaintop to give him plus 20% chant area of effect. And his chants are very nice passive buffs, really. Or they can even be offensive if you choose to build them that way. In any case, he's a chanter, so he's not going to be as tough as Eder, but something that complements his class very well, in my opinion, is Rionas's breastplate. And again, I'm talking about building him as an off tank, which is the case I use in my playthrough. This breastplate here kind of makes Kana like a fighter, because this one gives Kana intellect, which is always useful for a chanter. It has decent damage reduction, and it also gives some critical abilities that only fighters have, like Vigorous Defense. If you can give this to a chanter as a tank, it's an excellent ability. It can trigger, very good. And you also have Triggered Immunity, which is one of the highest level spells that you can get for a fighter. 1 per encounter. So this is anytime, and this is 1 per encounter. So fighters get 2 per encounter, you get 1 per encounter here for free. Very, very good breastplate if you want to off tank on a chanter. Really loved it. I think it's an important item to have, and it works very well. The other item I really liked is Executioner's Hood. This one works very well because it has the intimidating presence, making everybody in the area frightened, and as an off tank, you're usually going to be close to the enemies, so you are debuffing them with both your items, your chants, and just overall off-tanking. Something else that also works for that effect is this shield here, Redfield, which also has the Harbinger, which is a passive that reduces everybody's accuracy, which is very, very good. Works very well in conjunction with the chants and this hood. It could be any shield. This one is just cool to have. For the weapon, both for Kana as well as Eder, in my opinion, honestly, you can use kind of anything you want. For Kana, it's cool to have something with +1 enemies engaged, because this is not something that you can easily get on a chanter, while on a fighter it is actually easy to get. So this one works very well. It could be any number of other weapons you could choose. The rest here, the rings are the same as Eder. I have deflection and I have defenses. Over here I have some resolve, but it could be anything. And over here I have a blunting belt. As for the abilities, let's go over them quickly. And you guys, once again, can pause whenever you want. These are my attributes. These are my skills. The skills didn't really matter on most of my characters. Really, survival and athletics are the ones that I usually make use of, with, of course, mechanics on my rogue. The active effects, you guys can see it if you want. And then in terms of abilities, we have them here. Okay, these were the chants I chose. Right here. And these were the talents I chose. So, once again, he's built as an off tank, so all of these will kind of make sense for any kind of tank. Deflection, 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 defenses, done. Going for Aloth. Doesn't really matter what you use as items, as Aloth really, what makes him strong are his spells, naturally. And, in my opinion, the Rod of Pale Shades is supremely important. I think you picked this up on level 8 on the Endless Paths of Odnua, but I don't want to lie. I don't remember the level. But whatever this is, I think, one of the most important items for Aloth. Because it says here, attacks can stun on crits. What it doesn't say, and I'm not sure if this is a bug, is that spells also stun on crit, which is massive. You put up a chill fog, which is ticking every second, and if you crit, you are stunning people. If you have Blast, which is a talent, a wizard talent, Blast can also crit and can stun everybody in the area. Excellent, excellent item. Really, don't underestimate this. Other than that, I mean, I have extra spell damage, I have extra defenses, I have increased area of effect on abilities, I have the Belt of the Royal Deadfire Cannoneer. This could be on anyone, to be honest, it would even be good on my tank there. But the stats here are the reason why I chose it for Aloth. Might, Dex, Int, just perfect for him. And that's pretty much all we have on Aloth of interest. In terms of what was chosen, these are my attributes, these are my skills, active effects, you're gonna see a lot of stuff here from items. And then in terms of abilities, we have these over here. The Mastered Wizard spells are the ones that we have as per encounter. I really like all of these choices. And then I think we can ignore these spells because these are the ones I know, but I picked these up on level ups and I also picked these up from Grimoires. So I think the only ones that are really worth mentioning here are the Pool of Eora. I don't think you can get this on any Grimoire. I think you can only pick this up as a level up choice. So that one could be worth considering. And finally, I think the level 8 spells, which you can only choose 2. I chose the Wall of Many Colors and the Wilting Wind, and also Major Grimoire Imprint. I was really disappointed with this one. I used it once and never again. Wall of Many Colors is absurd. It's incredibly good. Pick this one every single time, in my opinion. Wilting Wind is cool. It's raw damage in AoE. I used it a couple of times. It does good damage. In terms of my talents, here we go. It's just weapon focus, which isn't even the one I should be using. I should be using the one that gives me accuracy for wands, because the Minor Blights, a level 3 spell that does the massive damage, is counted as a wand. Other than that, we have Blast, Penetrating Blast, Dangerous Implement, which are all complementing the AoE of the Blast. Sneak Attack for more damage, Interrupting Blows, because you hit in AoE, you can interrupt everyone around you. Marksman for more accuracy, Arcane Veil as a defensive instant ability. Going for the Grieving Mother. Don't think we have anything special right here, honestly. We have defensive on this ring. We have intellect on this ring. Nothing special on... actually, this armor here has damage to flank targets, which is, you know, just good. The more damage you have, the more focus points you get, so the more you can do, the better for you. A helmet with might. Shoes with dexterity. That's really the only reason I have it for. I don't even use this at all. This one is really cool. I think you pick this one up in the White March Part 1. You get more intellect while endurance is above 50%, but you also get plus 25% focus gain while endurance is above 50%. If you are playing a right, your endurance should be above 50% for the entirety of a fight because it's in the backline. So, very, very good talisman right here. I like Rionas's Van Braces, especially since I'm playing mostly with her with the Blunderbuss. This gives you DR bypass, which is very good for a weapon that does low damage. And then we just have some Constitution over here, nothing really special. So in my case, I built her to use Blunderbuss. And the reason for it is the Blunderbuss, if you have good damage reduction, can deal a massive amount of damage in bursts, which means if you get a nice hit at the start of a fight, you are pretty much at 100 and something focus points instantly, which will allow you to cast anything you want. Defensive Mind Web, Amplified Wave, multiple Amplified Waves even, a bunch of other spells. So it's a really quick way to get a lot of focus points. And, you know, it also deals a lot of damage, so I think it's a good way to build it as DPS. The other weapon I liked was a Stormcaller, like I said. I played with this weapon. Even without any kind of talents spec'd for this performed very well. So I believe that building the Grieving Mother to use hunting bows would be a very good way to build it as well. And make use of the Stormcaller, especially if you don't have any Ranger or a Chanter using this. As for what we chose for her, let me see here. Attributes, nothing special here. Skills, the same thing. Active effects. We have our abilities here. And I think the only ones that interest me here are Soul Whip, which gives you more damage and more focus gain. And then we have the Cipher spells that we chose. And thinking back on this, I'm also going to show off the spells that I think are most interesting on a wizard, because you kind of have to choose them and purchase them from grimoires, so it's worth mentioning. I like the spells that I chose for the Cipher, even though I mostly used like 3 or 4, and that's about it. I've gone over the ones that are more important in my opinion, which is Pain Block, Silent Scream, Amplified Wave, Time Parasite kinda, and Defensive Mind Web just being an absolute banger. It's super good, this one. As for our talents, something to complement our focus gain in Biting Whip and Draining Whip, and then, you know, since we are using a Blunderbuss, Penetrating Shot, Weapon Focus Ruffian, Marksman could be used for anything, Sneak Attack for more damage, Gunner for reload speed, and Envenom Strike for some extra raw damage, because why not? So, just going back to Mr. Aloth here, I just want to show the grimoire that I ended up using. This is an end-game grimoire. There's a couple of spells here that you can only get after defeating certain enemies. Like, for example, Consul Hot's Crushing Doom, you only get this after killing Consul Hot. Ninagot's Shadow Flame, you only get this after going to the White March in a secret grimoire. And then I also have a couple of these, which are from Landgrath after killing Landgrath. In any case, what are, in my opinion, the most important spells you can get and should always get on a wizard? Eldritch Aim. This is good always. Always an amazing spell. More accuracy means more hits, means more crits, even if the enemy is highly buffed up and with very good defenses. Chill Fog. Amazing spell. Probably the spell I use the most during the entire game. You put this somewhere, it lasts for 21 seconds, and it just keeps on ticking. It keeps hitting people with freeze damage, it keeps on blinding them, it hits in an AoE, it's easy to put ahead of your tank to just keep debuffing the front line. Blinded, I think, will also enable sneak attacks, so just awesome spell. Slicken. This can be an excellent spell. However, it only lasts for pretty much 5.5 seconds. I mean, it's very good. You can knock everybody prone at once in an AoE, but I don't really use it that much. I just prefer to use something like a Chill Fog. And then at a certain point, once you get this, there's no real point for you to use Slicken anymore. But at the start of the game, Slicken, very useful spell. The fourth one, whatever, doesn't really matter. For level 2, the best spells in my opinion, you have Miasma of Dull-Mindedness. This is a massive debuff. Be aware it's not party friendly, this will also hit your own friends. But this is a massive debuff on your enemies. It will allow you to land many other spells a lot easier if they are afflicted with this. The rest of my spells, you can just kind of choose whatever you want. I just went for defensive stuff here. Bulwark against the elements for damage reduction against the elements, more endurance and max health, and just a mirrored image. These are kind of whatever. The other noteworthy mention here is the Merciless Gaze. This one is very good. It's 15% of hits converted to crits that lasts for a minute, which is amazing. The reason why it's not here, it's because I have it as per encounter. Could have done the same thing with the Chill Fog, but there's really nothing else here that I would want, so it's fine. Level 3, Arcane Dampener. This is effectively a boss killer. If you use this spell, all beneficial effects are suspended for 21 seconds. If you are facing a wizard, or a group of wizards, or druids, or priests, or paladins, anybody that likes to buff themselves up with defensive spells, if they get hit by this, they are naked. This is this is the same thing, or kind of the same thing, as a remove magic in Baldur's Gate. You hit somebody with this and they have no defenses. Especially if it's something like a wizard, the only thing they have as defense is a robe. And they won't last very long with just a robe. We saw this being useful against especially Lengrath and also against Theos. Because these are boss type enemies which already have a lot of defenses, and they buff themselves up to have even more defenses, and you can barely hit them. Or you can't even hit them at all, given how much defense they have. This is just super useful. Also noteworthy to say, there's also a lot of fights in which you don't need the Arcane Dampener. Because in most fights, you're fighting enemies that don't buff themselves that much, so you end up not even using this. But when you do need to use this, this is priceless. There are also some rings which do this effect, which can also help you out. Very good spell. Calicott's Minor Blights. This is kind of a crucial spell for a wizard built like Aloth, which the damage is coming from passive auto attacks, not from something like fireballs, for example. Because if you cast Minor Blights, you have 84 seconds. Okay, the base time is 60 seconds. You have a machine gun of death over here with AoE on Aloth. While if you cast a fireball, you just have a little bit of burst damage. And this costs you one spell, this also costs you one spell. This, over time, will deal tremendously more damage than 4 fireballs would ever deal. So I built Aloth to use something like this with Blast, Penetrating Blast, all those things. This is crucial for this build. Then I just went with Lengrath's Placed Image because it gives me good defenses and I don't need anything else. But I guess noteworthy mentions here would be expose vulnerabilities, soften up the opposition, or something like Arduous Delay of Motion to kind of slow down your opponents. The other very important spell is Deleterious Alacrity of Motion. The reason why I don't have it here, once again, is because I have this as a mastery spell, which means I have one per encounter. This is the best spell you have for Aloth, really. It will make him attack and cast 50% faster for 42 seconds, which is a very long time. He also runs faster, and he takes a little bit of damage. This spell is ridiculous. It's extremely good. In any fight where you expect to need a lot of spells in quick succession or a lot of attacks quickly, use it. It's just amazing. For level 4, the most important spells here are Ninagoth's Shadow Flame. This is effectively a fireball that deals freeze damage, but paralyzes everything in the area. This is busted. It's an amazing spell. Always take it, in my opinion. Pool of Eora is fun. You don't need it, but it's fun. You can group up enemies and then just nuke them all in that particular area. Wall of Flame is very cool. I ended up not using it that often because I didn't really need it. But this is continuously dealing burn damage to enemies. It's not that it's a lot of damage, but every time it ticks, it's interrupting people for half a second. And it ticks very often. So a cool spell to have. And finally, I just had this over here and I never really used it. The other spell I would consider saying that is very good is the Riding Tentacles, especially early in the game, can be very useful. They can block enemies, they can become tanks on the battlefield, they can even keep enemies stuck to the ground, and the types of damage they inflict are not easily resisted, so Crush and Corrode. And the other very important spell, especially for early in the game, is Confusion. You have a faux AoE, so party friendly. The area is kinda large, especially if you buff up with Intellect, and it lasts for a very good time. So very, very good spell, a very, very good disabling spell. If you have played Baldur's Gate, this is the equivalent spell to Chaos, or just Confusion, I believe. It's devastating. This is very, very good. If you need to buy time, if your backline is being assaulted by numerous enemies, if somebody knocked down your tank and is streaming into your backline, you cast this on them and you buy yourself a lot of breathing room. You have time to buff, run away, kill enemies, anything you need. Awesome spell. For level 5, I think really the best spells are the ones I have here. The Wondrous Torment, again, like this one, the Miasma of Dull-Mindedness. This one is single target, but it's only for foes, so you don't hit your own party with that, because that one is not party friendly. It gives somebody a massive penalty, which, again, will make it so you can hit your other spells a lot more reliably. So this is excellent for any kind of boss fight, any kind of single tough opponent. Excellent spell. We also have Lengrad's Safeguard. I like this one because it's a superb defensive spell. Lasts for a very long time, and it only triggers when you reach 50% endurance, but still, it's very useful. And you don't really need anything else over here. I guess you could take a Malignant Cloud, which is also useful if you're fighting some enemies that have a lot of resistance to, for example, pierce damage, which is my most common type of damage. This one will just keep ticking raw damage, which there is no defense against. So it can kill very tough opponents very quickly. So it's actually worth mentioning here. I also have Call to Slumber, which in my opinion is a better version of the level 4 Confusion spell, because it will make everybody in the area unconscious. So not only are they effectively disabled, but if they are confused, they can still attack your party. And if they get confused and become your allies, you cannot target them, which is incredibly annoying. Or for example, if somebody gets confused and comes to your side and you cast a buff, for example with Durance, with the Priest, that buff will actually hit them. So you're effectively making your enemies tougher when the confusion ends. If they're unconscious, they are still your enemies, and they cannot take any action. Dexterity is reduced to 0, and reflex and deflection are reduced by 40, which makes them very easy kills. Excellent spell. I love it. I use it a bunch of times. Very useful. And finally, the other one I think is best is Ringrim's Enervating Terror. Will just make everybody in the area, your enemies, terrified and weakened. Terrified is a very nasty debuff, and weakened is also a very useful debuff. Did not use this as much as I should, but trust me, it's a massive debuff, very good spell to use. For level 6, I think the best spells here are without a doubt Gaze of the Adragan. This is the best spell, and one of the best spells you have as a wizard, period. You petrify people in an AoE. It's party friendly. What does Petrified do? Petrified will make somebody effectively paralyzed, but they also take double damage. So if you have a target that has a lot of HP and you want to bring down fast, like let's say a dragon, if you can land a petrification, they will die in these 8 seconds, guaranteed. You burst them down, they will die. They take immense amounts of damage. Very good spell. Very, very good spell. Nina God's Freezing Pillar is not bad. It deals some AoE freeze damage and will leave everybody hobbled. It's kind of like a Chill Fog, but at the same time, Chill Fog does pretty much the same thing, and it's a level 1 spell. This is a level 6 spell. The other one I really liked and I was very impressed with, I didn't even consider this spell at the start, but I got very impressed with it, is the Precisely Piercing Burst, because it deals a lot of AoE damage, it has damage reduction bypass, and it targets reflex, which can also be cool because you have a lot of damaging spells which target Fortitude, and this one targets something else, and it's party friendly and hits in a radius. So, the way I like to do this is to combo it with the Gaze of the Adragan. You petrify a bunch of enemies, you run up to them and you cast 3 piercing bursts, everything will die. Sitzal's martial power can be good if you are building something like a fighter mage. Didn't really use it that often, spellcasting is disabled, so I don't like it that much, but it is fun. And that's really all we have here. These two, I think, are the most important spells, with this one really being the main one. For level 7, there's nothing really here that's very interesting, with the exception of Console Hot's Crushing Doom. This is actually a very cool spell. You can only get it after killing Console Hot, so keep that in mind. But even though it says here it deals crush damage and can prone the target, this is actually much better, because this slams down, repeatedly slams down into its target. So this isn't a one-time thing. It continuously slams down on the target, and as it strikes, it becomes more accurate and deals more damage. I can't really tell you how long this lasts, but it does last a very decent amount of time. So a very good spell here. I think Killing Bolt can be cool because it deals raw damage. That's its main utility, and that's about it. The rest is kind of irrelevant. For level 8, Wall of Many Colors, one of the best spells in the game. This will kill your enemies, it will dominate them, paralyze them, petrify them. It's party friendly, the area is kind of massive, and if people stand on the wall, they continuously take this effect. So if you have somebody that gets, for example, petrified on the wall, they can then take, like, I don't know, they can just die outright to the damage of the wall, or they can get petrified again, or paralyzed after the petrification goes away. This is just one of the best spells in the game, honestly. Other than that, I picked Wilting Wind. It's cool, AoE raw damage and leaves people weakened. But really the most important spell here is Wall of Many Colors. The rest doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's my spells. I might do a different video when I talk about wizards, explaining the spells in more detail, but I think these are the main ones I wanted to mention. For my rogue, so like we've discussed, this is our single target killer. Priority targets are his specialty. He deals massive single target damage with his bow. It could do a similar thing with melee weapons, although in Iron Man Triple Crown, I don't really want a squishy target to go into melee. It's very, very risky in my opinion. In terms of items, I gave him some stuff that gives him some more might. I really like this armor here because you can always have Deleterious Alacrity of Motion, although you can also very easily get it from potions, and I didn't use crafting enough, but for example here, I could craft 100 potions of Deleterious Alacrity of Motion. So it's it's no issue here, okay? But having a way to get it, you know, just passively, anytime you want, you can have it per rest, naturally, is a very cool thing to have available. So I like this armor here. He gets some dexterity from this ring and some defenses from over here, but the important things for my rogue are honestly getting an ability to get more damage to flank targets. It's very important because you always want to try and be hitting people that are flanked and primed for sneak attack. I have this cloak which gives him more range damage and also some accuracy against beasts, which is useful against dragons in particular. We have the Gauntlets of Swift Action, making him shoot faster, which is pretty cool. And then I just have a Constitution belt because his base Constitution is pitiful. I think it was like 3 when I created the character. Yeah, so it's 3. So giving him some Constitution just so he doesn't die to a brisk wind is a good idea. In terms of weapons, I chose Borasane. This is something you can pick up very early in the game as soon as you reach Defiance Bay. It's an excellent bow. It's an excellent weapon. As a war bow, it has decent damage. Restores some damage as endurance. This is actually not that bad because you can mitigate passive damage that you keep on taking fairly quickly with the amount of damage you deal. But the most important part here really is that attacks can stun on crits. Rogues crit like madmen. They have a lot of accuracy. They have a lot of abilities to convert hits to crits. As an Orlan, you have even more. So it works very well for a rogue. Not only are you dealing a lot of damage to priority targets, you are also disabling them without even needing to use skills. So very, very good. Once you get sap, this is not as useful, let's say, but it's still very good and it works very well for the entire time until you have sap. I love this weapon. I've used it before, both on a rogue or a ranger or anyone else. Very good weapon. I can just mention some consumables here, which are also interesting. Like I said, potions of Alacrity of Motion are always good. And then, if you can, also get some Flasks of War Paint. More accuracy, more damage. What else do you want? In terms of the build, we can see our attributes over here. Do keep in mind that since this is my main character, there are some things that I might have here which you cannot get for non-main characters. At least I think so. For example, Berat's boon you can only get on your main character, which is the boon from the gods. And the Song of the Head... No, that's an item. But in terms of talents and abilities, let's just look at the skills first. So as a rogue, I like putting points in mechanics. And I think having 13 mechanics is the most important number. But 14, I think, allows you to take care of every single thing in the game. 14 takes care of it all. I also like having survival at 6, which means you can get bonus damage to flank targets, and you can also get the bonus accuracy against an enemy type, which are all very useful. But that's pretty much it. Some stealth can be cool, but not necessary. Mechanics and survival are the important ones here. In terms of active effects, we have this. We can see here. Try to make sure you are not playing with suppressed stuff, like I was at the start of the game. Or up until a fairly late point in the game. Do not have this. This is bad. I was trying to stack, for example, range damage or bonus damage against flank targets. Those things don't stack. Look at your character screen here, and if you have something suppressed, take care of that. As for our abilities, these are the ones that I picked. So keep in mind there's a couple of them that you only get because this is the Watcher, our main character, such as this one, and Steps of the Wheel and Speaker of the Restless. And as for talents, these are my choices, and again, keep in mind there are certain things here that are from being a main character. In any case, we have what you expect to have on a ranged character. Marksman, Vicious Fighting for more DPS, Penetrating Shot, Bloody Slaughter, Devastating Blow, and that's kind of it. And I also chose Gallant's Focus because it's cool. It's a good aura to have for all of your friends. Extra accuracy, also affects yourself, stacks with everything. Very cool. Finally, we're gonna go for Durance. Durance is kind of like Aloth. His gear doesn't really matter. What you really want is the spells. With that said, I like to build Durance as somebody using a hatchet and a shield to give him some extra accuracy, because for the most part your priest isn't gonna be auto-attacking, at least not the way I play them. He's usually spending the entire fight buffing, debuffing, tossing out spells. He's not really just, you know, axing people in the face. In any case, I have more intellect. This one I think is important. Giving Durance a piece of armor that has second chance, I think is really good, because if your priest goes down, it can be problematic, because that means you cannot give your party protection from domination or petrification or paralyzation. You don't have anybody to heal. So yeah, making sure that if he goes down, especially to something that hits in a very large AoE and can kill your backline at once, like for example a Dragon's Breath, having him come back up and take care of business is very important, at least in my opinion. So I really like this armor here, Whisk Glass, for him, because it's also a robe, recovery speed is very low, which means he can cast very quickly. I have some extra spell uses here in Seal of Fate. You can pick this up in Defiance Bay. Shodin Faith Boots can also be useful. He's sitting with the backline. If we get hit by a crit in the back, we have passive healing. Dexterity to cast faster. Area of effect, very important. This is also just some damage reduction and granting wood skin on the party. So just extra passive defenses here. And I really like, especially like I said, since I build him with a hatchet and a shield, Little Savior is amazing. It will help out Durance, naturally, and everybody in 3-meter radius will also get a +5 to all defenses. Excellent shield, loved it. As for our build here, these are our attributes. The most important attributes for a priest, I would say, is might. Well, there's a lot of them. It's gonna be dexterity, I think, is the most important. It means you can cast more quickly, which is very important. You want to get your buffs out as quickly as possible. Perception, I mean, it's naturally useful. You can debuff your enemies or hit them with spells more accurately, more frequently. But you can see here, I didn't even bother to buff perception. Perhaps I should, but the most important part of the priest is to buff your own party, not necessarily to debuff your enemies. Although, of course, it's useful, but not as necessary. Intellect, I think, is the second most important attribute you can have. The more duration you can have on your spells and the more area of effect, the better. It's kind of a no-brainer, but it's true. And might, you know, you do more healing. But really the important ones are, in my opinion, dexterity, intellect, and probably perception. As for our skills, these do not matter. I just gave him some lore if I wanted to read some scrolls, didn't even read one. Athletics just for an emergency heal if I needed to, and survival for extra damage reduction and healing. These are my active effects. And in terms of our abilities, we have these. Our Mastered Priest spells are Blessing, Devotions for the Faithful, Dire Blessing, and Repulsing Seal. These could be whatever you prefer. In my opinion, I think Blessing, especially Devotions for the Faithful and Dire Blessing, are always good choices, because you can cast this in every single fight, because it's always going to benefit you. You don't need any special condition to use these spells. So something that you can always use, I think, is what you should choose as your Mastered Priest spells. Repulsing Seal was mostly for fun, but I guess I got some use out of it. I guess you could also go for Consecrated Ground, would also be an excellent choice. Yeah, probably Consecrated Ground would be a better choice here. That would be my pick, honestly. What else? We're gonna look at our talents, and I like to buff the interdiction here. So interdiction, painful interdiction, empowered interdiction are something that I like. Then I have some more defenses on weapon and shield style, superior deflection, and bear's fortitude. Scion of Flame just for some extra fire damage. And inspiring radiance to when I use my holy radiance, not only am I healing my friends, I'm also giving them some extra accuracy. Okay, so last thing I want to mention here are the spells. The most important spells for a priest, in my opinion, are going to be Armor of Faith for the early game in particular. Blessing as a mastered spell is amazing. You can always use this. You get more accuracy and more damage in percentage. So this is very important, being percentages of level 1 spell. Very good because it scales the entire game. Divine Terror is also not bad. You can frighten everybody in the area and it's party friendly. Although I have an item that does that for me. And the rest, I mean, you have useful spells, but nothing. Oh, okay, Withdraw. Withdraw is also very important, is useful the entire game. You can save somebody that's being targeted. Very, very cool. Level 2 spells, I think Consecrated Ground is probably the most important one. And also Suppress Affliction. If you are finding yourself targeted by something like an insect plague, something that's ticking over time and is very nasty debuff, especially coming from druids, Suppress Affliction will help you out tremendously. Level 3. I didn't even use level 3 spells that much. Well, except Dire Blessing, again, as a mastered spell. Very good. Converting hits to crits for a long duration. Pretty decent. Circle of Protection, giving everybody plus 15 to all defenses. Also very good. And then I guess for some very specific fights, Despondent Blows can be good. This will debuff your opponents, giving them less accuracy and converting crits to hits. So especially on the early game, when you start facing some powerful ogres that hit very, very hard, if you debuff them with this, and especially because they attack very slowly, this is a very nasty debuff as well. Pillar of Faith can prone opponents. Kinda useful, but not that important. On level 4, you get what is, in my opinion, the best spell you can get on a priest, which is Devotions for the Faithful. Everybody in a large area is gonna get buffed with might and accuracy, and your enemies are gonna lose a tremendous amount of might and will also lose accuracy for a long duration. Awesome spell. Other than that, also very important, you have Prayer Against Bewilderment. It will make you immune to confusion. And Dazed, of course. And Shining Beacon can also be a pretty nasty debuff. It will lower all defenses and also put a dot on people for 130 burn damage over a couple of seconds. Going for level 5, the most important spells here I think is Champion's Boon, especially if you are fighting bosses. Giving somebody plus 10 might and plus 10 perception and even some damage reduction for a long time is amazing. The most important one is Prayer Against Imprisonment. You make everybody in your party immune to paralyzation and petrification is massive. This is critical for various fights. And I guess Salvation of Time can increase the duration of your beneficial effects, also very good. And Shields for the Faithful for extra deflection, quite nice. But the important ones here, the most important one here really is Prayer Against Imprisonment. On level 6, Crowns for the Faithful is amazing. Gives you a lot of resolve. Gives you perception and intellect in an AoE. Awesome. Also, extremely important, Prayer Against Treachery, making your characters immune to charm and domination. For several fights, this is crucial. And then you have some cool stuff like Cleansing Flame can deal tremendous amounts of damage, and Spark the Souls of the Righteous. It might not seem like much, but this also does a lot of damage for a bit of time. Going for level 7, Minor Avatar is amazing. You deal extra damage and you have plus 8 to all of your stats for a very long time. This is an amazing spell. You know, Resurrection is kind of whatever. You can resurrect your friends. Sure, it's not bad. And you also have Storm of Holy Fire, which is just an AoE burn damage spell. Very large area. Nothing special, but can be useful. On level 8 spells, amazingly enough, are the least interesting spells, especially for a Priest of Magran. The Hand of Will and Woe, it sounds cool, but the positioning required and the distance to cast is not very friendly. Symbol of Magran, again, sounds cool, but you have to be in 3 meters from the fight. But it is good. I guess this is the only really good spell in level 8, if you can cast it. And Watchful Guardian, it's kinda whatever. If people fall down, they get revived with Endurance. Sure. Never used it, but I can see usefulness for that. Okay, so this still took a lot of time. But, I mean, we have to talk about things, so they take some time to discuss. And finally, we are gonna go over our party reputations and all those things. So, this is strictly role-playing value. We were primarily a benevolent, diplomatic, and honest person. We were rational and we were passionate. I have a little bit of deceptive here, maybe because of one thing or another, very specific things, but we mostly played as a good person. This will affect the way that people in the world react to your presence. It will affect dialogues, it will affect some quests, but overall it's not that important. You can play whichever way you want and you can have a pretty nice game. You won't lose access to quests or NPCs like that. At least nothing major. I've played as a terrible person, very deceptive, very cruel, and I loved the playthrough anyway. In terms of our reputations, I mean, the more quests you do for the factions, the better your reputation is going to be. We are extremely good. Defiance Bay, Gilded Vale, overwhelmingly good. Champion of Deerford Village, moderately good on Twin Helms, because Twin Helms has several factions. And we did some good, we did some bad. And then, you know, this isn't very important here. We are extremely bad, we are scoundrels to the Ethic Knoll, maybe because we decimated that entire faction. But for the rest of them, we are good. Time in the game was apparently 1 year. Travel time was 8 months. And time in combat was 6 days, 7 hours and 30 minutes. We killed 4,225 enemies. Jesus Christ. The hell? Okay. The most powerful enemy defeated was Brindlod by Aloth. This was a bounty, right? I think this only takes into consideration the level of the enemy. I'm guessing this one was a particularly high level enemy. The most time in the party was Aloth because we picked him up as our first companion and we never took him out of the party. The most enemies defeated was Aloth because, like I said, he's our primary AoE damage dealer. Most total damage done, again, Aloth, because, again, AoE damage dealer. So if you deal damage in AoE, you're going to deal more damage. The highest single target damage was my rogue, Mr. Cordam, 327. I believe this was a finishing blow on a dragon, I think. The most crits was Aloth, again, AoE. The most hits was Durance. I'm guessing it's because some of our spells hit both my party and the enemies, and we also have the Painful Interdiction, which hits in a very large AoE. I'm guessing that's why, because this is a very large number. The most damage taken, who would have thought, Eder, our main tank. He took 34,000 damage, poor guy. And the most times knocked out was Aloth, the Grieving Mother, and myself, Mr. Cordam, which was 3 times each. If we look at the personal stuff here, my most powerful enemy defeated was Roadwith. Don't even remember who this was. We dealt 214,000 damage. We critted nearly 3,000 times, 1,500 hits, damage taken quite a lot. Let me just compare this with Aloth here. He dealt 308,000 damage in total, 6,444 yeah, a lot more crits and a lot more hits because, yeah, AoE, makes sense. As for it there, he killed 414 people. The most powerful was a Priest of Magran. Oh my god. And he got knocked out once. I think he got knocked out... Where? In the Temple of Eothas, I think, in the first area of the game. And then he never went down again. As for Kana, he defeated a dominated raider, woohoo, and he took 14,000 damage, so it's pretty much less than half of what he there took, but like I said, he was not our primary tank. The Grieving Mother killed the Deadfire Backstabber, apparently. She also dealt a lot of damage. Wow. Wait, she dealt more damage than my Rogue. And I'm guessing this is mostly because of the amplified waves, which do a lot of damage. Very cool. And then Durance killed the Deadfire Shanty Singer, killed 330 people, awesome, and took 9,700 damage times knockdown 2. Okay, and that is it for the review of this party. Naturally, the most important thing of this entire party, and this is something that I wouldn't change in this playthrough for anything else, is the Piglet. The Piglet is the most amazing companion you can have in the game. He's cute, he's fun, it half trots, half runs to your side in an effort to keep pace, and snorts appreciatively when its flanks are scratched. How can you not love this companion? He's the best companion in the game. There he is. We shall all praise the piggy for eternity. He is our best friend.
Found time for contemplation.
But yeah, so these are my thoughts about the game. This is my review of the party that we have created here. It's gonna be a long video. I try to keep it as short as possible, but I just can't help myself. But speaking about these things, I'm very, very happy that I was able to do this run solely with story companions. It's actually the first time I've done it. I think the last time I did this with the most story companions, my Kana slot was something else. I think it was a monk off tank, a custom one. This time we have all story companions. We did the quests for all of them to completion. A lot of interesting things to say. Like I said, I love the companions. I'm very happy that you all reached the end of the game alive. None of us died. We completed the Triple Crown achievement. I had already done it twice before, like I said at the start, but it's always nice to complete one more. And you guys can expect to see Tiny Mustache Man here in Pillars of Eternity 2 once I import the save game there, which is going to be a blind playthrough. So, I think I've discussed everything that I wanted to discuss. There's probably a lot more things I could talk about, but I have to keep this somewhat short. If there is something that I missed, anything that you want to see, anything you guys want to ask, leave a comment below. I'm going to keep this save available, so let's say that somebody wants to see, I don't know, what the second ring on Kana was, I can just come over here and check it out, and I'll answer you guys in comments. So anything you want to know, let me know and I'll show you, or I'll just tell you in a comment as well. If you have any suggestions, if you guys want to share your experience with the game, what you think about the game, if you want to give any kind of advice for Pillars of Eternity 2, feel free to do so in the comments. I love to see what you guys think and interact with you all as a community. I want to once again thank everybody that stuck around for the playthrough. I had a lot of people that were new to the channel when I started playing Pillars of Eternity, and I made a lot of new acquaintances, spoken to a lot of people. Some people have regular comments saying what they think, what they would like to see, giving me suggestions, helping me out. And I love that, honestly, while playing the game. So, whatever you guys need, whatever you want to know, feel free to leave a comment and I'll answer back. If you guys are interested in more content like this, you know, consider subscribing to the channel. There's videos coming out every single day, be it of CRPGs or any other kind of game, or reviews of games, guides for games that I like. I'm also planning on making some guides for Pillars of Eternity. Maybe talking about the best spells for wizards and priests, or just, you know, how to approach Path of the Damned difficulty, positioning, strategies, those things, which I like doing. So yeah, stick around, and, you know, I hope to see you all in some other video, and until then, stay safe, everyone.